almost every day I just hold my son. And that makes a difference because we don't shy away from the correction. We don't shy away from the things that need to happen, but trying to be very, very intentional of making that connection as well. It's sending the message of this thing was bad, but you're not bad. I don't love this action, but I love you. And that's not conditional on your behavior, on my mood, or any of these things that come out sideways.
Welcome to the Crucible Project Podcast. The Crucible Project is a nonprofit organization committed to creating a world of men and women who live with integrity, grace, and courage, helping them to fulfill their God-given purpose. This podcast will discuss important and sometimes difficult topics while delivering practical life applications with men and women who are currently practicing this work. We are igniting Christ-like change in men and women through experiences of radical honesty and grace.
Welcome to the Crucible Project Podcast. I am your host for today. My name is Joy, and I'm here today with Tim Kinnaird from our Mid-Atlantic community. Hey, Tim.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Thanks for joining me. Why don't you tell us a little about yourself?
So I grew up in West Texas, met my wife there, and I have two boys, Theo and Lincoln, at 5 and 8 months. Yeah, we live now in the Mid-Atlantic, about halfway between Baltimore and Washington, D.C., working with a small church in this area. People say, how did you get to the Mid-Atlantic from Texas? And I tell them we were going to New Zealand, but we didn't have a map. And so there's a group of us in the same school and missions backgrounds, and we formed a team to plant a church in Auckland. And COVID happened. They shut down their borders. We had gone on a survey trip. We had gotten a plan together, and it was very improbable that anyone would be able to get a visa for years was the projection at the time. And so there were a few of us on that team that said, hey, we want to stick together. So our little remnant started looking around and ended up finding this congregation up here in the Mid-Atlantic where one of our teammates is from. I've found that God's will and guidance is often recognized in hindsight. And in hindsight, man, he was opening doors and closing things gently and firmly that we may not have even recognized in the moment. And so with us being here, we get to kind of operate in a Venn diagram of local small church ministry, a church plant kind of dynamic, and then a revitalization. We just get to hang out and wear a lot of different hats in the middle of that.
What were you doing before you moved to the Mid-Atlantic region and got started with all of that?
We've been here 4 years, give or take. It'll be 4 years this fall. And then before that, I was working odd jobs. A lot of that New Zealand stuff was prep time. And so it was going to seminary, going through mission school, just working, making a way in the meantime. Before that, was blessed to be in a program to be a missionary in South America for about a year. So I got to work with a mission team down there as a young, very ignorant man and learn a lot and figure things out and not figure things out. And that just really sparked a desire to serve in a unique way, getting into people's lives and letting people into our own. Yeah. And so my wife had a similar experience, just a different location. And it was, hey, we're going somewhere. And that somewhere shifted a little bit, but here we are.
How long have you and your wife been married?
We will be married 8 years this fall. So enough to figure out what we don't know. Man, it's just been really, really cool. Both of our families all live in Lubbock. And so coming here has been, man, it's been trial and challenge, but it's done so much for us of just not having the safety net. It's us, right? Thank God for FaceTime and for just the ease of travel we have in our time period. But it's been a really, really ups and downs and craziness we can get into. But I feel like we're really firing on all cylinders the last couple of years. And part of it is because of this work and the ripple effect that it's had.
I love that. My husband and I had a similar story. We moved across the country. We had 2 really young kids, and it was so hard. So really honor the work that you and your wife are doing to build and establish community where you are. And absolutely thank God for technology and the ability to FaceTime with grandparents.
We definitely don't take for granted, for sure.
Yeah. Well, let's get into your Crucible experience. When did you go on your initial weekend?
Yeah, my initial weekend was the fall of 2018, and that was the end of a trajectory of chaos, it seemed, in my world. Rewind just a little bit, I'd blown my life up. I'd made some choices and overnight lost most of everything that held dear. And so that's a story for another time, but I'd find myself working in those areas with other tools, counseling and things like that. Really made some great progress. And then fast forward to about a year later, there was a medical accident in my family, and dealing with that, I got that person out of the hospital. 2 weeks later, got married. Within that marriage, trying to hold together my parents' divorce. I mean, it was chaos, 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 chaos. And I found that there was nothing in my church world that was really getting at what I was needing to meet that chaos. Internal, external, again, part my choices, part everything else. But I started to recognize there's this message of all of you is welcome, but the reality that I was experiencing was if blank. All of you is welcome if blank. So kind of recognizing that is like, I need something different. I don't care what it is. I'm all in. And I have a long-time familial connection with Tim Rush. And so I pulled up to Perry, Kansas. I knew Tim on staff. I knew one other man. And I was like, I don't care what it is. I'm going all out. And that was, as we're sitting here today, one of the most impactful decisions of my life.
That was almost 7 years ago. How old were you when you did your initial retreat?
I did it the month before my 24th birthday.
Okay.
So I was 23 going into it.
My memory of being that age is you've lived just enough life to make some really bad choices and see what's not working, and yet still don't quite know how to put it all together and do something that is working. I hear you say that life was in chaos. You had that message of all of you is welcome if. What were some of those ifs that made you feel like you weren't really actually welcome?
Good question. I found in this work that there's probably something underneath what you think you're dealing with, right? There's the symptom and then there's the actual issue. And so I went to get discipline, clarity, these things that I thought I needed. And underneath there was just this kid screaming, accept me, right? He just knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that everybody around him was just waiting for an opportunity to send him out to pasture and be done with him. It was on that weekend that I got to see him, and I've heard other people say that push the beach ball down, just repress and deny he's there and deal with him that way, but actually embrace him and thank him and engage with him in a way where I get to be in the driver's seat instead of him.
Yeah.
And so that initial weekend was just getting a taste of God loves me and accepts me, and there are men in this world who I love and respect who see and accept me and still challenge and still correct and still, even rebuke. But to be able to do that in a context of love and acceptance was something that hadn't been my experience before. And that was refreshing and peaceful, just to let the shoulders down.
Yeah. Yeah. For our listeners, if you're not familiar with the beach ball analogy, what we're talking about is the idea that if you have a beach ball, you can try to hold it underwater, you can try to push it down, but eventually it's going to pop up. The farther down you push it, the higher up it pops up and flies out of the water again. And so in Crucible, we like to use that analogy as a way of representing the things that we want to hide or repress or deny. We try to sometimes shove them down out of the way and pretend like they're not there. The harder you work to make it disappear, the wider the spread goes, that it tends to come out sideways. And so I hear you saying that some of the things that you were looking for were acceptance and clarity. I think about that in relation to your work as a missionary, putting yourself out there, stepping into different cultures and stepping into different fundraising needs. What was that like for you?
The weekend landed in the middle of doing some work and preparing for others. And so it kind of had this clarity in the hindsight and preparation for the future. What I recognized on the weekend was I would hide away so that you wouldn't reject me. I'm still rejected. I'm still on the outs on my terms. And it's like, that doesn't make any sense. It made perfect sense in the world that I had set up. And man, it was so exhausting to need something, not know I needed something, and then react to it, not knowing what was needed. It was just so confusing. And so I found myself having this want to serve and help and do all the things that are needed and be a conduit of grace and just all the things, but at the same time wanting to run and hide at every turn. So being able to step into the work and see why it wasn't just a all right, we're going to stop doing that now. It's okay, let's meet these needs in healthy ways so that I could be whole to pour into other people. The people we're ministering to, my wife, my sons, now pouring from an empty cup that was marked by fear of rejection was not working.
Yeah. Let's talk about your sons. You are a young dad. You have a couple of little boys there. Going through my Crucible weekend definitely impacted the way that I saw my own kids. So I'm curious what the impact of your weekend has been, even in the way that you show up as a dad.
I went through my initial weekend before I became a dad.
Mm-hmm.
And so going into it, honestly, there's a lot of fear. It's like, man, I have a taste of the depths that I'm going to mess my kids up. There was that initial fear, but there was also like, man, I have tools now to do this different. And so, that looks like I can apologize better to my sons when I cross a line. And I can tell my oldest, who I have more context with just because he's older, I can tell Theo, hey, I'm sorry I popped off. Daddy was just scared. I know I sounded angry, but I was scared, right? It's doing that kind of thing. One kind of tangible example from the time my oldest was very little and could just start to communicate. You can tell when your kids fall and they get hurt. And then you can tell when they fall and they're embarrassed. Right. And so from the very beginning, because of these dynamics of recognizing, hey, there's an emotional element, there's a spiritual element, there's more going on than my snapping reveals, we would ask him, hey, are you hurt or embarrassed? And he could differentiate those really, really early. And that seems kind of like a little thing, but he's recognizing early on these dynamics that some of us never get to look at, or maybe that we get to look at them so late. There are things that my sons will see as normal that I couldn't have imagined. They'll see things as normal that just seem insane right now because we're stepping into, not perfectly at all, but because we're stepping into authentically, I'm already seeing a little bit of the fruit of that even in just 5 years.
That's beautiful. Even just that simple idea of physical pain versus emotional pain.
Mm-hmm.
How many of us learned as a kid that one is acceptable and the other is not? That's huge. What kind of generation is that going to produce?
Yeah. What things are our grandkids never going to dream of because we're doing work 2 generations before? The vision is really, really cool, even if the day-to-day is, man, I have no clue what I'm doing. But holding on to that vision and stepping in authentically is just, man, what can God do with that? It is crazy to think. I was looking over my vows and we wrote our own. I could hardly read them. My handwriting's terrible. And so one of the things that I could read, and this was before my weekend, but I vowed to protect my wife from myself. What that implied was I'm going to protect, in kind of the language we use, protect them from stuff coming out sideways with me. And so I'm trying to create the world that I wanted in their shoes and protect them from stuff coming out sideways. There's times like, man, I don't want to step into that stuff anymore. I don't want to step into that darkness. I don't want to step into this work, but I need to because I know that this is my responsibility to protect my family.
Absolutely. There's still going to be wounds that our kids are going to have to deal with, but it's looking at what tools can we get so that we can build something even bigger, even better, and more solid for them to stand on. The idea of you can use a hammer to put a screw into something, but how much more effective would it be to use a screwdriver? And even better if you have a drill, right?
Yeah.
How do we take the tools that are out there and put them into use? So what are some of the tactics that you apply to your life as a dad because of the things that you've learned through Crucible?
Yeah, so one of the things that I recognize in my initial weekend and all, staffings and everything, it just comes up over and over again is I have a need for connection, but I also have a message that connection is conditional. And so one of the things that plays out as I'm trying to create a new world for my family is discipline comes with connection. So there's a lot of correction that has to happen with a 5-year-old. There's a lot of correction that I'm sure will come online with the baby as he gets older. But I want that coupled with connection. And so it's, hey, we're not shying away from this was bad, but I'm going to hold you anyway. Yeah. Right. And I accept you, not just you when you're in a certain behavioral state. That's a big deal. And that's man, I'm going to be really bummed when he's too physically big to do this, but there's almost every day I just hold my son. And that makes a difference because we don't shy away from the correction. We don't shy away from the things that need to happen, but trying to be very, very intentional of making that connection as well. It's sending the message of this thing was bad, but you're not bad. I don't love this action, but I love you. And that's not conditional on your behavior, on my mood, or any of these things that come out sideways.
Yeah, that's powerful. One of the things that impacts our parenting is our relationship with our spouse. How does your work with Crucible and the things that you learned from your retreat impact your connection with your wife and the way that you two show up for each other?
First of all, I love how supportive she is of me stepping into this work. There's an element of how involved I am in this community. There's time, there's money. She's never hesitant to make space for me to step into these things. And I think that's because she's seen the impact of the work on our relationship. And so practically what that looks like is we can dig a little bit deeper. There's a language there of knowing what to look for, of our worlds of dealing with symptoms instead of what's going on underneath. Being able to share perspectives that I've gained and project them onto her world as well has really brought us together.
Yeah. I'm curious, how has your work in Crucible impacted your relationship with your own dad?
He's actually gone through, he did his initial weekend a few months before mine. I think there's always this awkward time when you transition from being a child to a peer when it comes to being both adults. And so we entered into that time with some chaos. I've just noticed that Crucible has given me such building blocks because of going through a weekend so early. It's given me building blocks in family, in parenting, and being a spouse or being a husband, and really gave us the building blocks to rebuild this peer-to-peer friendship. And so there's things that we can't or don't sweep under the rug because we have the tools and the language to address it. And we've gotten a taste of having full truth be accepted with full grace.
Again, we talk about the impact of a marriage on your kids, but your kids are also watching the way that you interact with their grandparents. And that right there, too, sets a tone for what you want for a relationship with them because they see what you had with your parents. And that's such a generational gift of stepping into something different, full grace, full truth, full honesty, and acceptance.
With all of those relationships, especially the parental ones, like we have our ups and downs, and there's still, there's a lot of challenge, but to show up complete here at the core is so different. Whether it be with my mom or dad or my wife, my kids, or the strangers on the street, when your core is different, when your core feels complete, I found myself not projecting all that junk. And so I can actually be more present and engage with this relationship, even if there's really, really hard things, because I'm not having to do a battle on two fronts. Right. And battle might not be the right word, but my energy isn't having to handle things on two fronts. Not to say that I'm perfect or complete or done doing work, but man, the impact of showing up in a complete way and letting this relationship, this dynamic be its dynamic and not bring in all this other junk is, use the word liberating. I'm free to love my parents better. I'm free to love my sons and my wife better. I'm free to love the people in our church better because I'm not bringing in all this other baggage.
What I hear in that is wholeheartedness.
Yeah, it's a good word.
In Crucible, we talk about integrity. If you go on our website, one of the big words that you see all over is integrity. And yes, we do mean, being a person who is true to your word, letting your yes be yes and your no be no. But another part of integrity is being in agreement with yourself and living from that wholehearted place where you don't have to show up as a different person depending on the circumstance that you're in.
There's something I hold to. It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. And so there's a lot of things that are my fault too, but there's so much that, hey, it's not saying that this is your fault or anything like that, but it is my responsibility to show up for my family well. It's my responsibility to show up for my church well. It's my responsibility to show up for these guys, even though maybe the thing that makes that showing up challenging, maybe those circumstances aren't my fault, but it is my responsibility to do the work, right? And that's much easier to learn early on than it is down the road.
Absolutely. So in light of that responsibility, I believe that the messages that we struggle with, when you walk into the weekend, you might find better clarity on them. You might understand the root of some of them, But those messages like to find a way to pop out, no matter how long you've been in the work. Some of those messages are just the way that the enemy gets at us and picks at us and tries to put us in a place of feeling less than and like we don't belong, living out our true purpose and God-given passion. So what does that look like now for you when those messages show up still? I heard you say all of you is welcome if, and connection being conditional. How does that play out right now for you?
It's funny. I've noticed with messaging and with even kind of that covert, shadowy behavior we do to cover those things, is that when I've continued to do the work, there are things that I caught in hindsight long time ago, and then continue to do more work. It's like maybe I caught it a little bit sooner. Do a little bit more work, maybe I catch it in the moment. And there's still, there's ups and downs, not perfect in that. But I find myself catching that and saying, okay, go anyway. Even like I was on a second level weekend just like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it was, man, there's the same message kind of playing out, and it refined a little bit towards, hey, you're not the guy for the job. Man, I'm a connector. I can plug people in and do all those good things out of that. But at the end of the day, like there's a part of me that doesn't believe I'm the guy for the job. And it's like, you might not be, but you might be the guy that God placed here right now. And so it's kind of counterintuitive. It's not rebuttaling that message, but just walking forward anyway. Right.
Yeah. Feels very Esther-ish.
Yeah. And that's such a liberating question. Right. And I think about Daniel, and I was teaching a class on Daniel, and it's amazing to me how much time is covered in that book. Right? We're talking decades and decades and decades, and the events of the book don't really cover that much time. And so it's a reminder that steady long-term faithfulness is more important than event woohoo. And so staying on that steady, faithful, doing the next right thing really helps combat some of those messages of maybe you're not the right guy. Well, just do the right next thing, right? Whatever the message is. And so it's a faithfulness that doesn't ignore what those things are saying, but actually listens to a more true voice coming from God and the circumstance and the people that he's put around us.
There's so much power in that too. You don't have to look 10 years down the road. It's what comes next. How can I be faithful in the next step?
And with little guys, thinking about going back to having little kids, that might be what happens in the next 5 minutes. It could be the next 5 years. I don't know. But what's the next right step? Because I trust God. I trust where he's leading, and I trust that everything's going to be okay. And if it's not okay, it's not the end.
Yeah. So we have listeners from all walks of life who tune into this podcast. And if we have a young dad listening, and maybe he hasn't been through a weekend yet, I recognize that time away from your family is such a sacrifice right now, right?
Sure.
Leaving for a weekend when your kids are this age versus leaving for a weekend when your kids are out of the house hits different for the spouse who stays at home, right? So what would you say to the dad listening who's debating, is this worth it? Should I go?
The overly simple answer is come and see. Right? It's an open invitation to come and see and to ask yourself, what if I stepped into this work and found something that changed my life? What if I step into this work and I never parent the same again? What if I step into this 48 hours that sets a trajectory that my grandkids are going to be thankful for? And that's going to have impact in generations so far down the road, they don't remember my name. And that sounds a little superfluous and heady, but it's the truth. How much impact can 48 hours have with God, right? When we've set the stage for him to work in that impactful way. And so it's very easy for a stranger in audio recording on the internet to say, it's worth it. So take that, but also take, man, what if? What could it look like? And just really encourage men to step into a faith-driven optimism and curiosity. Come and see.
I got goosebumps from that.
Well, and especially if you're listening and you're a young man, what if you had tools and support that maybe you've never had before? Because you have what it takes. You have what it takes to step into it. And what I found on this weekend, more than just the weekend, but especially the continuing work and being in community with this kind of work, is that men in our age demographic just need to know there's somebody in their corner. And so that's been a huge impact of my life. And maybe you find that person, maybe you find that community, maybe you find just that possibility that someone can be in your corner, rooting for you in your marriage, rooting for you in your work, rooting for you in your parenting, correcting and guiding as well. But my judgment is that men, especially Christian men, don't have the support that's needed, and the mirror that points back and says, hey, you have what it takes because God's working in your life, and let me walk with you.
Those 5 words are such a blessing. For me, for our listeners, we all need that reminder that you have what it takes.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just preaching out of 2 Timothy, and he's talking, his divine power has given us everything we need for life and godliness. And it's funny because I think a lot of people with a church background have heard that and chanted it, put it on the cups and the t-shirts. But do we really trust that he's given us everything? Do we really trust that there's not something lacking? And the hook of that is it's his power. It's his dynamos. It's his dynamite working inside you. So there's nothing you can do or not do that trumps his power. Do you trust when he says you're complete? And that's really, really challenging and something I'm wrestling with, but that's one of the beauties of it being in black and white. So you can just go back to it. So you have what it takes, and that's not just fluff, that's scripture. And so are we going to live that way is the question. I remember this was in high school. My government economics teacher, his wife passed. And it was brutal. Small town, everybody knows everybody, that kind of deal. And it was a heavy, heavy time. And I remember just as, 15, 16-year-old kid, I remember him saying, it's all going to be okay in the end. And if it's not okay, it's not the end. He had such a faith walking through that, knowing that it was going to be okay, that he was going to see her again, but also watching him mourn, even though he knew that, was really impactful to my teenage self. And so as I look to the future, there's a ton of optimism of what God is up to, of what he's up to in a general sense, what he's up to in a particular sense in this work. And so, guys, if you're thinking about stepping into this work, I encourage you to do it with a level of optimism, knowing that God is doing the thing, that we're just setting the stage for what he's up to. And if it's in his hands, then it's going to be good. And there's still going to be challenges. There's still going to be things that, man, I really don't want to look at that, or you're going to have to maybe wrestle with quite a bit. But at the end of the day, there's a level of optimism and security, knowing that he wants this work and this completion in you, maybe even more than you do. Right. And so why not partner with him? Why not step into it? Why not find that one guy? Maybe he invited you. Maybe he's the one familiar face when you come, but somebody that's going to be in your corner, says, I see this in you, and I'm willing to walk with you while you find it as we walk together following Christ. And so that would be my invitation. My kind of final thoughts is, man, I'm really optimistic for the future. I'm optimistic for the future for young men, and it's going to take all of us stepping into each other's corners and doing the battle together.
Well, Tim, thank you for your time today. Thanks for sharing your thoughts, and blessings to you and your wife and your kids and your ministry. Just really appreciate hearing your insights.
Sure. Thank you.
For more information about our weekends, please go to thecrucibleproject.org. Or if you're ready to get started on your transformational journey right now, you can connect with one of our Crucible certified coaches for a free 30-minute session at thecrucibleproject.org/coaching. That's thecrucibleproject.org/coaching. If you like what you heard, connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Rate and review wherever you are listening, and don't forget to subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. Thank you for listening.